to break down. So, what is needed after financial crisis? As you can see here, number one is to restore confidence. And to do that, we need three sets of so-called safety net. Number one is the system to dispose non-performing loans in the bank. Number two is the way to recapitalize bank. That is, the government would give those banks taxpayers' money. This is called in the United States bailout, and actually they did after the Lehman shock. Number three is to give guarantee by the government on all kinds of interbank lending. This was also done right after the Lehman shock. And then, once the confidence was restored, then, as I explained to you in the last slide, we have to introduce fiscal stimulus. And, for example, in the area of economic infrastructure, government spend lots of money to build new railroad or roads, and then I think employ lots of people who are unemployed. And in that way, you can improve the unemployment rate and also, I think, stimulate the entire real economy. The very important keyword here is real economy. We did have the same kind of quantitative easing, which all countries are now doing. We did it in 1990s, late 1990s, after our financial crisis. And our experience is it didn't work at all. It didn't work at all. Central bank can supply only liquidity, but even the interest rate is very low, like 0.5, 0%. Manufacturers, they don't want to borrow money if they don't have the vision in the future. That is, by borrowing money and build factories, they have a concern whether those products they will produce in those factories can be sold. If not so, they will suffer from a heavy, borrowing, which they have to repay. So, until the time they will restore confidence in the future, this quantitative easing will not work. So, and after you establish these three sets of safety net, what is very important is to conduct very rigid examination of bank balance sheets and make it public that how much money is needed to recapitalize those banks. And this would, I think, necessitate that the board members of major banks should leave, because they were responsible for the failure of their business. And this was done in Japan. Actually, all board members of major banks that were bailed out in Japan in 1997, 1998, all of them were put in jail. Board members of one major bank, they actually battled in our court up to the Supreme Court, and they won. But others, they actually served in jail. And this did not stop to that level, but we, as government officer in charge of those liquidation, were really heavily criticized by the Japanese mass media, Japanese mass public, and also by very famous economists in the world who are my friends, like Larry Summers or Tim Gardner. And because of that, we suffered from an investigation of the official prosecutors in 1998. And some of my friends who worked with me as a group, they were arrested, and some of them committed suicide, died. And I'm a kind of rare species because I actually survived in those, investigation. Unfortunately, I refused all of the dinners offered by our friends working in the banks. So I was not, I think, arrested those days. But so we had suffered a lot. But we were able to contain our problem only inside Japan. So what I think sounds very strange to me is my friends in the United States or in the United Kingdom, they were not able to contain their problem inside the countries and caused this huge, I think, world crisis, I think, now ongoing. But nobody was, I think, arrested among Wall Street, major bank, or bond members. And so there is a very deep sense of unsatisfaction among American public and also the British public, because they saw those rich people at the top of the Wall Street who were rescued by the government using their, I think, money. That is, I think, taxpayers' money. So this slide explains what was the, I think, situation in 2010 when lots of European countries were attacked. As a result of the quantitative easing, as you can see on the right, there was excess liquidity in the market, which were not used by manufacturers. And then, on the left down, there are some countries which suffer from deficits in the budget, like Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and this one is, I think, Italy, last one. And I think third factor is there are lots of investment banks who look like healthy, thanks to the fake I think, examination called stress test, but they were actually insolvent. So what they did was they borrowed this excess liquidity at a very low interest rate, and by using the measures like short sales of their government bonds or CDS, credit default swap, they attacked the government bonds of these European countries, Greece and Ireland, Portugal, and they tried to escape from insolvency. And as a result of this, those countries had to ask for rescue to IMF. And of course, IMF, when they lend out money, they put austerity measures in their budget. And this is completely on the contrary to what I had proposed in the last slide. That is, at the time of the big economic crisis, it is the government which have to take risks and increase their government stimulus. But what IMF actually demanded is just to reduce the government spending. So this will start the vicious circle. That is, for example, banks, they will have to reduce their lending so that their balance sheet would be healthy. Okay? And then this would lead to the lower economic growth, and also lower price of the real estate and lower price of housing. And as you know, bank has banks usually take those real estate as collateral. So the value of their the value of their collateral will be reduced, and then the bank have to reduce again their exposure to those manufacturers. So it goes to the very bad circle. Okay, so now let me turn into the issue of Russian rule. Very traditional theory says very simple. If a country has trade surplus, its currency should be appreciated. And if a country has a high inflation, well, that country's currency should be depreciated. That is a very traditional theory based upon the old world, maybe before 1990. But after mid-1980s, after the creation of so-called the euro market in London, the size of cross-border capital flows really increased. Well, amazingly increased. So now, what would determine the rate of a currency is not based upon this kind of old theory, but maneuvers by speculators. And usually, main players are financial institutions. So always we have to watch how those speculators would act. And I will explain their behavior later. And in the case of oil exporting countries such as Russia, it is also a kind of the established theory that decline in oil prices will lead to depreciation of currency. Because people believe that in the case of oil exporting countries, their trade surplus is closely related to the price of oil. So it is very important to understand why oil prices now decline. The main player is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is now intentionally trying to reduce the oil price with three objectives. Number one is they would like to target Iran. Iran is Saudi Arabia's arch enemy because Saudi is the center of Sunni, while Iran is the center of Shia. And now Iran is now making a compromise with Western world after 35 years. So Saudi doesn't want Iran to become a big player. So in order to reduce the revenue of Iran, Saudi Arabia is now trying to reduce the oil price. So Iran is their first target. Second target is Russia, because Saudis believe that Russia is the very important ally of Iran. And number three, third target is U.S. shale oil. Saudi wants to be the major player in the consumption of oil in the United States. So the movement toward developing shale oil in the United States is conceived by them as a big problem. And as you know, that the average break-even point of shale oil is $75 per barrel. So now with the level of $70 per barrel, actually the shale oil breakdown point has been broken. So then the question is, how long this effort by Saudi can last? And in this area, unfortunately, views are still divided. Some say that this will continue until the end of next year. Saudi can have a power to continue until the end of next year. Others say this might stop sometime spring next year. So this timing would heavily affect Russia too. So in doing this, if you think back, my explanation about exchange rate, the same kind of theory holds here. If Saudi just acts on their own and nobody follows Saudi, it will not cause a problem. For Saudi to get supporter in that move, they need a kind of the general atmosphere or basic concept which would conform to the all that economic traditional theory. And here I have two. First of all, stagnant advanced economy. Second, slowdown of Chinese economy. So these would indicate that there will be weak demand for oil. So oil price should go down. But as I mentioned in the area of banking sector, oil sector too is a virtual one. So whether this a kind of the rumor which is floated by Saudi will continue or not is very important. So I'd like to mention only two things. In the area of advanced economy, Germany's policy is very important. Germany has fiscal space. Fiscal spaces means they don't have fiscal deficit, so they can make investment in their infrastructure. As you know that since 1990, almost all of their infrastructure investment was targeted in former East Germany area. So after 25 years, lots of economic infrastructure in former West Germany area has problem. So they have money and they have places to spend. So now European countries, they have been encouraging Germany to launch upon a large scale of physical stimulus, which would buoy up the German economy, and that will lead the recovery of European economy. So whether Germany would change that policy is one key factor. Number two is China. And in this area, I'm quite optimistic. The information about China is quite skewed in Western world because of the kind of the skewed view of mass media of Western countries. But Japan is so close to China, so we can detect those movements very, very closely. And you may or you may not know, but China, they used to have the 5 years business cycle, because every 5 years they change their leaders. In this case, leaders of regional governments. Of course, the leaders in the central government, they change every 10 years. And in the past, those local leaders, they stay in their provinces for 5 years. And in that 5 years, they try to stimulate their local economy as much as they can. The reason is, after 5 years, when they go back to their central government, those who achieved a very high growth rate can go back to a very important position, while others who did not achieve that kind of an objective were not able to get good position. So the pattern of the business cycle in China was first 3 years under the new leaders, a bubble, and the last 2 years, slowdown. And this time, in November of 2012, they chose Xi Jinping as the new leader. And local leaders were appointed towards the end of March of 2013. So everybody who knows this cycle had expected that 2013 and 14 and 15, China would have a bubble. And then 16 and 17 slowed down. But this time, it didn't happen. So people thought that China's vitality stopped. But this is completely wrong. They do have a big potential. Let me give you one example. In the year of 2000, there was nobody in China who enjoyed the living standard equal to Japanese. Nobody. But in 2010, the number increased to 100 million. And it is expected that in the year of 2020, this number will increase to 700 million. Of course, now we have, it is now in 2014, so the number of Chinese whose living standard is equal to ours is probably something like 300 million. But still they have 400 million people who would like to reach our living standard. That means 3 or 4 times the Japanese economy will be created. And between 2006 and 2010, their per capita income increased by 3 times. And in 2009, China passed Japan in terms of the absolute amount of GNP. And then this year, their GDP became double of Japan. In 2025, China would reach the level of the United States. So they still have a very big potential. So then, why the Chinese economy did not grow very fast these days? So the reason is Xi Jinping. He is the first, I think, communist leader who didn't have patrons who are the former leaders, like Deng Xiaoping or I think Jiang Zemin. So it took him 2 years to solidify his power. Finally, in the last week of July, he was able to announce the investigation of a very famous member of the Politburo, a guy named Mr. Zhou. This implies that his power has been stabilized. So, as soon as his power was stabilized, he was able to make compromise with us. So at the time of APEC meeting, he met our Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, for the first time. And the issues concerning Hong Kong, that will be, I think, resolved within a few weeks. And he has already started to control their armies completely. So I'm quite optimistic that Chinese economy will pick up sometime early next year. And that will start a very good cycle in Asian economy. Of course, that will give a very good effect on Japanese economy too. So if that will happen, the kind of theory which Saudis like will be broken. So here, as a kind of the last thing, I'd like to just list what should do and what should not do in this administration. First one, my message is don't do anything that would help speculators attack Russian ruble. What are the factors? Reduction in foreign reserve. If you intervene in foreign reserve to sustain the value of Russian ruble, of course you have to sell US dollars and you have to buy Russian ruble. In that way, you would lose foreign reserve, and that would give a very, very good reason for speculators to claim that Russia is now in danger. So don't do that. And then, number two, suppress inflation. If you have high inflation, that means the value of your currency would be reduced. So it is very important to keep the interest rate of the central government high so that the inflation would be controlled, and also high interest rate would give attractiveness in your currency to make investment. And number three is should avoid trade deficits, and also should avoid budget deficits, and should avoid prolongation of geopolitical tensions. But in this area, I am quite pessimistic because unfortunately we have very incompetent team surrounding Mr. Obama in U.S. White House. I have been attending very important meetings in Washington, D.C., which is hosted by CSIS, which is a very famous think tank. Last spring, I was invited to the dinner where about 200 people who are the very important people in the Department of Defense, Department of State, CIA, and Joint Chief of Staff, that is the U.S. military. And I had about 15 people in our table. And I was so surprised to hear the public denouncement of Mr. Obama. In my life with the USA for 35 years, I never heard ranking American people criticizing their own president. The big surprise was a guy who sat next to me, who looked very, very strong. And later I learned that he was the leader of the so-called anti-terrorist group in the military called named Delta Force. He served there, so he was in Iraq, Afghanistan, everywhere. And at his last career, he spent 8 years in Pentagon. That means he's a very, very brilliant leader. And he told me, well, in the public, he told me that Putin is a great leader. So I said, what? And he said, well, as soon as his counterpart acts something, Putin acts immediately with right answer. So he said Putin is a brilliant leader. While that is not the case of us, he just pointed to, well, Sky, that means Mr. Obama. And I was so surprised in that meeting, but that tendency, that atmosphere didn't change or even worsen when I had the same meeting last October in Washington, D.C. As you know that many people publicly demand that Obama should fire 6 people who are in a very small circle, surrounding him. Susan Rice and McDonough. McDonough is the chief of the staff. And Samantha Power, who is the ambassador in the United Nations, and most importantly, Victoria Nuland. She is the Assistant Secretary of the State in charge of Ukraine, who actually started this program in Ukraine with the ambassador for the United States in Kiev. So all of these people who are the kind of the arch enemy of Russia, they are still holding their power. And Mr. Hagel was the kind of leader who demanded Mr. Obama to fire them. And instead, he was fired. So there are lots of pressure is now mounting among the Democratic Party to do something to change that, team. Because as you know that in the last election, Republicans got the largest numbers of seats after the Second World War. So Democrats are afraid that if this would continue, then they might lose their presidential election in 2016. And also Democrats will be out of power for the next 20 years. So they are now trying very hard to get rid of those people. So then, what should be done? So from that point of view, I think it is a very good decision to introduce a flexible exchange rate, because that would maintain the foreign reserve and also keep the policy of inflation targeting. And most importantly, mitigation of the geopolitical tensions. And in this context, to try to invite foreign capital, especially from China and Japan. And I personally hope that the expected visit of Mr. Putin to Japan next year will solve finally our problem, and Japanese companies would follow the suit and come to the Russia, because we have a very good very good economic position, which is completely complementary. Russia is full of natural resources, while Japan does not. And so far, Russian companies are not good at producing consumer goods, while our companies are very good at it. So we are in a very good and complementary position. And both countries really love cultures above all. I'd just like to say that I came in Moscow yesterday by Aeroflot, but on the same flight today, your, Bolshoi ballet dancers, they come back from Tokyo this evening. And I have lots of friends among very famous dancers. So for the last 3 weeks in Tokyo, I actually enjoyed lots of their performances. Swan Lake, Лебединое озеро, и Фаяделька, и Don Quixote. And I had so many times dinners with drinks with Zaharova and Landratov, Alexandrova, and Lobuhin. So we really like our cultures. So that is also the case of Russia. So I think we have a lot of things in common, and also, this I should emphasize. Japanese people seems to be very serious, but we are very seriously working only in the daytime. After that, the Japanese like to drink a lot and sing a lot. And so perhaps that would, I think something in common with Russians. Okay, and last I'd like to mention lots of Russia has a large items of strength. I really emphasize this one because in the course of my experience in Russia, or in my personal link with my friend Russia, I sense a kind of I feel a kind of sense of solitude among Russian people. And but the Japanese have the same kind of experience, which is very, very unique. You may not understand, but when we opened up our country in 1867, at the time of the Meiji Restoration, we were able to, I think, strengthen our country and became the member of the advanced countries, even in 19th century. But since then, we I think, deeply felt the sense of isolation. For example, Japan was the only Asian country which was the advanced countries. Other countries, all from Europe or the United States, and even at the international organization, the OECD, among the 28 countries, Japan was the only Asian country. So we felt this sense of solitude or isolation for a long time. So if I just at the list those kind of things, big strengths of Russia is you have large level of foreign reserve, which is number 4 in the world. China, Japan, Taiwan, and Russia. Number 2, positive net industrial investment position. Number 3, low public debt. Number 4, small government deficit. So I'd like to emphasize that you should not worry too much about your future. But of course, we have lots of things you are expected to do. So-called I think structural reforms. The most important one is remove infrastructure bottlenecks, railroad or roads. If you compare Moscow and Beijing, China built so many highways within 10 years. They built highways in 1 year at the length which is comparable to the total extension of highways in China. So every year they build. Okay? And in this context, it is very important to use your national growth fund, I think, appropriately. And intervention in currency market for excessive volatility. This means, although I'm not against the very long, prolonged intervention, when you observe excessive short-term volatility, you should, I think, intervene and reduce these are the barriers, fighting corruption. But the most important thing is the last message I'd like to give you. Fight against speculators. And I will give you one specific example which I experienced in 2001. Those days, lots of speculators, mainly people working in the investment banks, foreign investment banks in Tokyo, they try to reduce the prices of Japanese stocks by selling out those kind of things. And so we try to stop it by imposing sanctions on those foreign financial institutions in Tokyo. But it was not successful. One day, I had a chance to talk to Finance Minister then, Mr. Shirokawa, and told him that those people who are engaged in this kind of speculation, they don't have loyalty to their nation. Most of them were actually Japanese. And they don't have any loyalty to their companies either. So just to impose sanctions on those companies, not work at all. It's not useful. So instead, I propose that we should identify those speculators and put them in jail. And this conversation was leaked in the major Japanese magazine. And when that magazine was published, in one morning, our stock price rose by 5%. That was the largest jump in the history. And in the afternoon, lots of journalists came to my office, and all of them asked me a list of the people. So I asked them, what kind of list? And then they said, well, all dealers in Tokyo are afraid that his name is in the list of people who should be sent to the jail. So all of them asked me to give them those lists. That kind of list, yeah, actually didn't exist, but I didn't say anything about it. So people just continue to be quite concerned about it. So within 1 week, our stock price went up substantially. So this is a very good example why we should call it virtual world. It is not based upon, I think, traditional theory, but those kind of things, theory would work if environment actually conforms to it, and then speculators would use it. But basically, it is a virtual world. So I hope that that kind of oral intervention by your authorities would work very effectively, also in Russia. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to.
Thank you very much, Professor now for your extremely interesting presentation. What are the questions, please? Nobody has questions? Then I do have. Yes. Professor, you mentioned that you approve of the measures aimed at making the rule flexible in order to prevent reduction of foreign reserves. And then higher interest rate. All this has been done in Russia. Primary interest rate is now 9.5%, and in fact, credit is available for our producers at about 16 at best, 18, and even higher interest rate. And this is not only the case after this higher primary rate was introduced. In fact, we have during many years suffered from high interest rate and interest rates. And but what is quite important is that last year there was practically no increase in investment in our country. This year we are going to have a decrease in investments. And so there is very strong pressure from production community to reduce interest rates. The second problem with the reduction of foreign reserves. Of course, the introduction of flexibility of the ruble has been completed by the end of October. But it should be noted that it had been declared before, much earlier, and that it so happened that though this policy was declared and step by step carried out, we have lost about 1/5 of our reserves this year, more than $80 billion. and only during October the number was approximately a little bit less than 30 billion dollars. As far as, I'm sorry for speaking so long, but I would like just to know your opinion on this whole situation. As far as the speculation is concerned, you know, I had a feeling that our president had known in advance your view about the necessity to fight speculation, because this was one of his theses during his address to the Federal Assembly just a few days ago. But the problem with Russia is to understand what is the role of speculation. Is it a cause or is it a result of what was happening in the past? Because you know, oil prices began to shrink just 2-3 months ago. But we have felt the depreciation of the currency before. Although all this time we have had surplus on our current account. So the only reason was capital flight, which this year is going to be enormous, approximately at the same level as 2008, about, according to the estimates by the Finance Ministry, about $130 billion. And what is that capital flight from Russia? We have a feeling that right now it is not so much the result of speculative attempts as a result of the fact that all major economic actors have no more trust in the rules. So the main form of capital flight seems to be flight from ruble to dollar or to euro. And those deposits are kept with Russian banks, but it is all the same capital flight because foreign assets are increasing in such a way. So the problem is, of course, sooner or later, nobody doubts. Sooner or later, the market has to find the equilibrium, especially if the government will be firm and will carry out what you said and what our government is saying. The problem is, today, is it politically feasible? Because really depreciation has been enormous, and it's okay to say that the current exchange rate is has quite gone a big way from the equilibrium level, but people and organizations feel themselves getting fuller and fuller. And though one of the main targets is inflation targeting now in this country, inflation is growing up in fact, it's growing through the import prices, and imports play a major role in our economy. So this is how I feel the problems with the implementation of this strategy.
Yeah, thank you. With regard to the issue of the depreciation of I think currency, I just compared the depreciation of the ruble with I think depreciation of Japanese yen since December 2012. December I think 2012, I took 2 reasons. Just I think 2 years ago, and that was the time when we got the new cabinet of Mr. Abe, and which started the so-called the Abenomics, and Japanese yen started to depreciate. And quite surprisingly, the degree of depreciation of Japanese yen is larger than the degree of depreciation of Russian ruble since I think December 2012. But in Japan, nobody has concern about it. Rather, most of the manufacturing companies, they welcome this movement. So here I'd like to emphasize that it is very important to have, I think, perception. That is, whether you actually have, I think, trust in your own country or not. That is very important. And of course, I can understand Russia, I think, drives the bad memory of 1998. So, but the administration now is completely different from 1998. Because in 1998, you didn't have huge amount of foreign reserve, and your government issued short-term, high-interest rate bonds at a very large amount, which has the maturity of 1 year. And finally, government fell short of the amount of money to be used for repayment and budgeting. But that will not happen now. So, in the market in Japan, people look at this kind of movements in both ways. Of course, some people suffer from them, but other people perceive it as a chance. Because if the Japanese yen is so low, then this is the time to buy it. So I hope that that kind of movement in the market would also start here in Russia. That is number one thing. And with regard to the kind of the vision in the future, I hope that Russia might want to further promote the economic ties with China. And you can export large amount of, well, materials to China. And you can import cheap goods from China. So that your two economies would be very closely combined, and that would give you a very good effect on inflation, and also, I think, the balance of trade. So I'd like to emphasize there are many ways to look at, I think, one thing. And with regard to this, I think, the issue you mentioned, I think, capital flight. I would assume that there are very large amount of that type of flight because Russian people, especially wealthy people, are concerned about the potential of the introduction of the control over the capital flows. So they try to change their currency holding before the introduction of the control over the capital. But there is a certain limit for that movement. So I hope, I think, this movement would I think, also stop, I think, sometime soon. And of course, the high interest rate is a big problem in Russia. And this comes from the fact that your banks doesn't have a substantial amount of deposits because of the bad experience in 1998. And some of your, I think, private companies borrow heavily from foreign countries, which gives those foreign banks to maneuver. But your case is not so bad as South Korea. South Korea is a very difficult position. As you may know, that in South Korea, only 3 to 5% were employed by so-called big industries such as Samsung or Hyundai. But 97% or 95% of their workers are working for small and medium-sized companies in South Korea. Because of that, South Korean ordinary people, they don't have any bank deposits. Instead, they borrow heavily using their card. That means South Korea doesn't have strong banking sector. So every time they want to compete with Japan or USA, they have to borrow heavily from foreign countries. It is fine if the world economy goes up. But once the shock like Lehman happened, they suffer from heavy deleveraging. That is to pay back and not borrow. So now almost all medium and small sized companies in South Korea went bankrupt. It is not reported in the mass media, but they are in a very difficult position. Among Asian countries, all Asian countries are doing well, except South Korea. Yeah, because of it. So it may be worthwhile to think about some kind of introduction of a policy to encourage ordinary people's deposits in the bank, so that you can have larger scale of banking sector in Russia, and that would enable you to start the loans to small and medium-sized companies, and surely that would reduce the rate of interest.
Thank you so much. I have some questions. Do you have some questions? Any questions? Then let us thank the professor for his extremely interesting presentation. View on the events going on both in national economy and the international economy, and it was really very interesting and helpful for us to learn from your experience. Thank you so much.